You're listening to the 14th source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses in the episode for Friday, June 21st, 2024. We're recording this the day after there are a bunch of like Nintendo announcements, which are kind of cool in terms of video games. We talk about like licensing jail and being freed on technicalities or something. Capcom announced, and this isn't Nintendo exclusive, it's coming to Steam, PlayStation, all that stuff, the Marvel vs. Capcom Collection, where we're getting everything from X-Men Children of the Atom to X-Men vs. Street Fighter to obviously the Marvel vs. Capcom stuff. And then also the Punisher side-scrolling beat-em-up game. Sure.
Okay.
But that's coming out.
Huh. Capcom also announced for the first time they're releasing Ace Attorney Investigations Part 2 as part of a bundle. So yeah, that's...
First time localized, yeah.
Yeah, first time localized.
Yeah. Metroid Prime 4 actually got a gameplay trailer after 7 years after its announcement.
Plus, it's the season finale of Doctor Who.
That's true.
Which we have not seen yet.
We have not seen yet.
It comes out on the 21st.
I'm too busy watching Pyramids of Mars right now, so... spoilers? Maybe? I don't know. Well, and then also, like, not related to video games, we probably talk about this later on down the line. Adobe is getting sued by, hold on, let me check, the American government?
The federal government? Yeah.
Sure.
And I like that everyone's response is like, it's about time.
Right? I mean, it makes sense. It tracks.
No one is lining up to defend Adobe on this one.
No, really, no, honestly. And hopefully every other company that charges, subscription services for its programs and apps that you used to be able to own, fucking pay attention. Not that we have any power or control over that. But instead of talking about sadness, let's talk about happiness, hopefully, with our respective Weeks in Geek. Last week was a hyping week when we were sort of just interested in things. Now we've had some hands-on, especially with you. So let's actually just start with you, Andrew. What was your Week in Geek like this week?
Oh, so how funny. Yeah, last week I talked about how I was hyped for this new role-playing game, tabletop role-playing game, or table talk role-playing game as it refers to itself.
Table talk?
Yeah, I believe he uses that phrase. In my understanding, that's actually how it's just like how tabletop RPGs are described in Japanese.
That's interesting.
Table talk. Yeah.
I like it.
I mean, I can't prove it because my Japanese is shit, but yeah, I can believe it. Anyway, I talked about Fabula Ultima, and on shortly after we recorded the podcast, I actually went to my normal roleplay group and said, "Hey guys, I really want to play this game." So we went through the introductory scenario. It's called Fabula Ultima Press Start, and it's basically meant to be like introduce the mechanics of the game one at a time. It's actually a pretty well executed introduction, similar to I think other tabletop role playing game intro and starter boxes. Right. So I played this game. It is I think as I said last time, it's as close as you're going to get to a tabletop Japanese role playing game or right. JRPG. Yeah. Very much in the style of Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest and Xenogears and Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy.
Shining Force?
And no. But I mean, like it has the games inspired by, and it's just a whole list of every JRPG you ever played on the Super Nintendo, the PlayStation. I don't know what's on there. But like I mean, all sorts of stuff, including new stuff like Bravely Default, Bravely Second, Octopath Traveler is referenced. So yeah, it's actually so we played it. It's a starter scenario. There's 4 characters and there's a little scenario. One of the things that it doesn't do that the game does. The game is very much when you first sit down to play, you kind of as a table, as a group, decide what your world is going to be, what the aesthetics are going to be, and they have some kind of ways to steer you in that way. So there is no preset world or preset, scenarios to play, except for this one. So it's a little bit weird because it has like characters with names and they're from places like, oh, this person's from, Armoria. And you're like, oh, what the hell is that? Like it's whatever it is. It's the country over there. And it does some prompt the players to fill out details. But I would say we sat down to play. We had some great experiences. I think from the start we knew that where this was going. When there's 4 characters and one of them, she is basically she's got a spear and like a magic power where she jumps in the air and stabs flying creatures. And it's like, oh, this is a dragoon from Final Fantasy. Like, no shit. And of course, one of my players says like, well, I hope she doesn't betray the group halfway through or anything. And I like flip to the end and there's a whole page of if Cassandra, the character's name, betrays the group. And it's funny you say that. You know,
That's really funny.
And for those that don't know, that is a reference to Final Fantasy IV,
Right.
Where the dragoon character Kane, does in fact betray the group halfway through. So but I will say, like, it, you know, we were still learning, but you know what I liked about it is you know, there's different kinds of tabletop role playing games, right?
Yeah.
There's some that are very like, you know, kind of casual. We're just kind of playing make believe with some like framework around it. Like some rules that motivate certain things. There's some very technical ones where you're doing lots of procedures for like counting how many hexes you crawl through the forest and stuff. This one, it manages to have some of the fun battle tactical choices that a more complicated game has, but doing it not on positioning and movement, but on like damage types and what kind of monsters you're fighting and stuff like that. More like Final Fantasy. I will tell you, like, one of the things I loved about being able to run this, I ran it online using a virtual tabletop, but like when we got to a battle, I literally had ripped images from the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters of the backgrounds of battle screens. And then I got monsters on the left and characters on the right, all lined up. And we went into a battle, and I even played battle music from Final Fantasy. And everyone was like, okay, yeah, we get what this is about. One player was confused and said, well, how do I move? And I'm like, you don't move. You're all lined up on the right, and they're lined up on the left, and you just attack each other.
Well, I gotta wait for my active time battle gauge to fill.
Oh, it doesn't. Luckily, it doesn't have that.
Oh, sorry, no, active talk battle gauge.
Active talk battle. So yeah, I mean, it was, and I can get why some people may be a little off put by that. Like, it leans so hard into the trope of the video game, but it's not recreating the video game. Like it's the feel, but not the mechanics, right? It's still a very, you know, kind of creative. Like there's this whole concept of, you know, in battle, one of the things a character can do is the objective action, which is basically if there's an objective to be accomplished, like, you know, doing whatever, but also the players can propose objectives, and they have a system called clocks to track progress. But the idea would be like the example they give is, hey, if you're fighting a big dragon that's flying, and a lot of the players are having trouble attacking it because they don't have ranged weapons.
Right.
Oh, well, you can create an objective of, you know, knocking the dragon out of the air, so players can take that action to try to ground the dragon or something like that, right? Yeah. Which is, and it is a creative character. You know, players just make that up, and then the GM assigns like a difficulty to it, and then they can take their time trying to do that, which I thought was actually really it's not as like prescribed as maybe Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder would be, but it definitely allows for a lot of flexibility, a lot of creativity, but also really feels like, yeah, you've captured the spirit of the JRPG. And yeah, so we played through that. I think, you know, we had a great time. Everyone seemed to enjoy it. Everyone was like, hey, this was fun. I want to do this again. So I'm probably going to look into starting my own ongoing game. But I just want to say, like, I played the game. I would say huge success. I am, you know, part of me almost looks at it like, wow, this is a game that I like. This is going to sound cheesy. I've dreamed about this game for years, you know, like, right. But this definitely does something that it accomplishes, like, the things I want out of a game,
right?
With this also very entertaining overlay of JRPGs. Like, the JRPG part is not what I was dreaming of, but like the undercarriage, the bits of the mechanics that accomplish that fantasy, do really, it is stuff that I really love. Yeah, so I would say A+.
I asked this question last time, but you didn't really have the information to maybe answer it. What other games on the market that you've played or are familiar with does this seem to be kind of not leaning into, but like lining up with, borrowing from, perhaps?
Everything. He actually has a list of role-playing games that he was inspired by. Okay. And it is literally everything from... there's some obvious ones. Blades in the Dark, which is a kind of a weird role-playing game. That's actually where the concept of clocks in role-playing game role-playing games were introduced. Not that the idea was necessarily original, but the way of saying, hey, you have this clock of something that's happening or something you're making progress toward, and everyone can see it on the table and everyone knows what it is. Because they use that directly in this game. There are definitely probably some, I think they mentioned Fate, they mentioned Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition, they mentioned 13th Age.
Okay.
So they're like, they definitely, it isn't, so where a lot of role-playing games nowadays are like, they're actually with the PBTA, Powered by the Apocalypse. So Apocalypse World came out in 2010 or so, 8, 9. And it was, a lot of people really liked it to the point where everyone started making hacks of it. So now there's just this idea, this game is PBTA.
Okay.
And a lot of games are. For example, the Avatar Last Airbender game is PBTA. Although they've made, added to it. Yeah, a lot of PBTAs out there. Blades in the Dark is one that's I think it's Apocalypse World adjacent, but now it also has, was it Forged in the Dark, right? So FITD, I think is what they call it.
Yeah.
When you have a game that's based on these mechanics. This one is not that. There are no direct, it isn't just, hey, this is the D&D system but with a new skin on it. It is, he put together his own thing. At least that's my understanding. I don't see any direct. I mean, there's obvious influences, but there's no direct line of this is just Apocalypse World with this extra thing and this extra thing.
Well, it sounds cool, and perhaps for actual gaming sessions, it sounds like you could put your skills as a 8-bit sprite editor to some use here.
Oh, and that is definitely the thing I realized. If I did, if I'm going to go hard into this game, yeah, I'm gonna dust off all my weird sprite edits and stuff and get back into that. The one thing I will say, this is and I feel bad because the virtual tabletop I used, Foundry. They had someone had built a system for playing Fabula Ultima, and in the book they have all these images of weapons and stuff, and they're little icons, right? And they're actually 16 by 16 pixel icons. So I of course, because I'm this guy, I extracted them all to put in the game. The problem was, and anyone who thinks about web development can see where this is going. I'm going to set the image for this thing, this job, this whatever, is this 16 by 16 image. The browser algorithm for resizing does not respect pixels.
Oh, no.
Right? So everything became really blurry, and I'm like,
no.
motherfucker. As it ends up, the system, he does have a checkbox for hey, change because there's actually a way to stretch images in a web browser that does a nearest neighbor pixel, so that keeps it pixelated. I just didn't know that. So I'm basically taking these 16 by 16 images and nearest neighbor expanding them to 256 by 256. And part of me always thinks of how bizarre is it that I'm I need something that's big enough but still small, and 256 pixels by 256 pixels is the size I set on. And when you think about it, that is basically almost the full screen of a Super Nintendo.
That's right.
Right.
Jesus.
In order to get this stupid icon to not get goopy on the screen, I had to make it the size of, because if you think the original Super Nintendo, they're all 320 by 200 essentially.
Yeah. Oh my God, really? That's crazy.
Yeah.
We've come a long way.
So basically, this icon would not fit. I could not draw this icon on a Super Nintendo display. It would be too tall.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so that's a follow-up to my week in hype with a week in execution. No, a week. Yeah, so that's my week in geek. We're not executing anything.
Not yet. When we need those numbers to go up.
We'll turn into that show. Anyway, that was my week in geek, Dan. What about you?
I saw a movie that was very sad, but very interesting, and definitely a dip into a world I don't know much about outside of the single year I quote unquote participated in it in high school. I watched a docudrama, I guess you could call it, called The Iron Claw.
Oh.
And this is, I guess, a historical film, biography film kind of thing, about the storied Von Erich family, which, if you don't know, it's this sort of lineage of professional wrestlers,
right,
that kind of got started by Fritz Von Erich, sort of the patriarch, the patriarch of the Von Erich family. And he had a billion sons that...
Not quite a billion.
Not quite. I think six.
Six, I think.
Most of whom became professional wrestlers. And well-regarded professional wrestlers in their own right. However, if you, if you don't know the story, of those 6 sons, only one survives to today, and it seems to be fairly happy and established and doing all right. Tragedy strikes his family quickly. Yeah,
right. But when you say only one survives, the other 5 is a lot of tragedy. Yeah. It isn't just they just had a no. It's tragic.
So it's well acted, well written. I found it very engaging. But of course, because I am who I am, and I'm sure you would be doing the same thing watching this movie, is I'm always going to Wikipedia, so what really happened here? And learning about the history as I'm watching the movie, which is probably not the healthiest way to watch a movie, but I find it fascinating. Before I go into the main thing that I found interesting about it, the acting was really good. The lead actor is our hometown hero, Zac Efron from San Luis Obispo, California, of High School Musical fame.
Isn't he actually from Arroyo Grande, California?
San Luis Obispo County. Fine, you want to split hairs like that? Jesus Christ. How long have you been out of that city? Are you still hold those weird grudges?
I make that joke because just yesterday at work I was talking with a colleague who is considered retiring to San Luis Obispo, and he's like, well, I was looking at Arroyo Grande because it seems it's a little nicer than San Luis, and I kind of got this oh, really? It's wow, I 20-some years later, and I still have some stupid, petty high school
There's still part of me where someone talks about Nepomo in my head, I'm like, Nipas? But whatever. He plays Kevin Von Erich, the second eldest, and it's basically a movie about him watching his brothers die. And it's fascinating, really well acted, really well. A lot of faces that are recognizable. They've been in everything, but the character actors, just really well executed, interesting movie. Got me actually interested in not necessarily wrestling, but definitely the history of wrestling. And it lines up with another dive I took into wrestling past recently. There's a podcast called Behind the Bastards, which focuses on, as you can probably guess, jerks throughout history. And the host did this 7-part, I think, series on Vince McMahon, which if you want to have a bad time, listen to the 7-part series on Vince McMahon. But the Von Erichs are mentioned throughout that because they were competing. Fritz, the patriarch, ran a competing, what they call it, a wrestling, I guess ultimately a wrestling company.
I think promotion, is the...
Exactly, right. Piqued my interest, especially once the movie came out. But the thing I found interesting is that some of the discourse around the film was about how they got stuff wrong, historically speaking. One, in the movie, there's only 5 brothers, not 6. And so some debate was happening, why did you leave this kid out? And what they did is they basically kind of folded 2 of the younger brothers into one brother. And the argument was, we didn't need this movie about people committing suicide to last 4 hours, right?
Right.
Well, my first reaction to seeing that was watch a documentary if you want the full story. This is a movie. Right? And it's telling a story about a character, and these are characters based on real people. But it really brought to the forefront, especially when it comes to historical films. And this is always something that comes up, and it's kind of boring after a while, where it's what's historically accurate and what's not. It doesn't make it a bad movie. What makes it a good movie or bad movie is if it's a story movie, badly told, right? It's funny, especially when it comes to niche interests like wrestling or whatever, right? Where they want. I saw this. It's not a historical film, but with Dune, right? There's a lot of super fans of the books that said that the second Dune movie specifically was bad because they changed a major element of the books. I'm like, well, if you think about what this movie is trying to do, that would make it kind of a bad movie,
right?
And so it got me really thinking about just storytelling versus history. And that being said, I think the choices they made in this film work to make it a good film and an engaging film, and a film that actually can get people engaged with either wrestling or the history of this family and to want to learn more because it tells an engaging and powerful story. That being said, it would be nice if there's almost a companion documentary that came out too. So
that's actually what I was thinking. Yeah. I think some movies have done that. Where they've had the docudrama, and then there's a companion piece of all right, let's talk about the documentary that looks at the movie, highlights what the reality was and stuff, so you can get both sides.
Right.
But like again, with the acknowledgement that the movie is a movie, it's trying to tell a story. It's not just giving you the history.
Right. But even then, like, documentaries are also movies, right? There has to be stuff left on the cutting room floor to make it fit a runtime, or to fit the narrative that they're trying to tell, or that the director or writer wants to tell, right? So like, there's no, like, the only way to get the history, the actual history, is to pull information from a variety of sources, aka actual research, right? And you shouldn't expect a single document to give you everything, right?
You telling me I can't just go to Wikipedia?
Oh, you can. And
actually,
in theory,
at this point,
it is aggregated information. It is pulling information from a variety of sources. It's not the worst place to start.
In some cases, it's maybe not the worst place to finish.
That's very true.
Sorry, I'm thinking of the meme of 20 years ago, like, oh, don't use Wikipedia for your research, and now it's like actually probably more reliable than half the shit you find on the internet.
That's true. But yeah, if anything, it was a fascinating watch that kind of continued the stuff I'd heard about the Von Erichs in that Behind the Bastards series. Am I interested in watching wrestling now? No. But I would say, if you are a fan of wrestling and have heard about this movie, haven't seen it yet, I watched it on Max. Go in there knowing like it is telling their story, but it is a movie about characters and themes that they're trying to tell, and is not trying to give you the real story, because it just would have been too long and would have been probably boring, right? It's a condensed timeline as well, just like all movies are, right? And all fictionalized historical narratives. But it's a really good introduction to this very sad and tragic story that I found very engaging. So the Iron Claw, and for those who don't know, that's like the Iron Claw is like the finishing move that Fritz Von Erich developed, that I think most, if not all, of his children that became professional wrestlers also used. One thing I did see is that unlike some historical dramas, this actually got me thinking, and made me even sadder. Zac Efron did meet up with Kevin Von Erich, who he plays, and got to spend a lot of time with him. And Kevin approved his performance, but I got me thinking, like, he didn't watch this movie, right? That'd be like horrible.
Well, maybe he did, that is that's a weird thing. That would be like,
to watch
here's
your
a movie
brothers die
about the
again?
tragedy that is my life.
Yeah, I know.
Let me watch it.
Yeah.
But, maybe it's been long enough, right? It has been a while. Maybe he's like, okay, I like, now it's history, right? It's sad, but like, I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah. The final scene, the way the movie culminates, is pretty poetic and beautiful. I was really impressed with the film. Despite it being about, huge buff dudes slapping against each other all for 2.5 hours.
Ooh.
So, depending on what you want to see on screen, it's got something for everybody. So, if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page of this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can find us on other social media as well, specifically places that Andrew and I frequent, which means you can find me on Instagram at dbethelcomics, and you can find Andrew on Mastodon at profounddark@dice.camp.
While you're at our website at forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page by following the link in the corner that says YouTube. There you'll find this show simulcast in YouTube. If you are listening to the show on YouTube, please like and subscribe, or as the kids like to say, ring that bell.
We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusi, the other is called District 4. Both written and performed by Kevin MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music and more at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 Attribution License.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out even more would be to leave some sort of review, whether a text review or using the proprietary metric will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. Well, we're not ones for planning ahead, but it's safe to say next week we're probably talking about Doctor Who.
That is true, right? Because we'll be at the end of the season. So for those of you that aren't a fan, you can tune out.
Yeah, that's why we gave you everything you wanted this week. Talked about tabletop games, talked about video games at the top. We talked about Nerd Law with the Adobe stuff, and we talked about wrestling. You're welcome. See you in 2 weeks. But for those that are excited about it, we are too. Man, that penultimate episode was something.
It was. The one thing I will say, leading into our discussion next week, is throughout the season how much there are direct mirrors of the 2005 season.
Yes.
It does feel like, hey, new network, new whatever. Let's do some of the greatest hits, but not the greatest hits of bringing back old stuff,
right,
but the greatest hits of here's the episode where we introduce. I'll say it. The episode of Rogue is literally let's introduce the charming, whatever Rogue. Time agent, bounty hunter, whatever he is, right, that kind of gets a little connection with the characters and then disappears.
Maybe a little bit less problematic than
right. One that maybe isn't, doing sex crimes or whatever.
And I will say 100% fewer farting aliens.
Yes.
So there's that.
A+.
Yeah.
A+.
So until you eradicate all farting aliens from your life, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplin.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast.
All right. Let's talk some table ttjrpgs.
Table talk.
Talk a little bit about wrestling. Let's make it quick, make it smooth, make it deep.
Okay, that just sounds like a bowel movement.
In terms of analysis and discussion.
It's a veritable bowel movement of a podcast.
Not the episode title.
Ooh,
come on.
I hear you, garbage truck.
I know you got a job to do, garbage truck.
But do it somewhere else.
What are you going to do? Space whales.
Space whales.
Yeah.
God, I forgot about that.